Welcome to my channel, the hidden drama where real-life stories unfold and every situation has a lesson. Some will surprise you, some will make you think, and some might feel closer to home than you expect. Now let's get into today's story. After I caught my father with my best friend, I confronted him. He called me jealous and kicked me out of the house. I lived in my car for months while he paid for her college. The night he got engaged to her, I walked into the party holding. I stood in the doorway of my own childhood bedroom, watching my father button his shirt, while my best friend Harper pulled the sheets up to cover herself, and the only thing I could think was how many times had this happened before while I was at work or asleep down the hall. "Get out of my room," I said, and my voice sounded like it belonged to someone else, someone calmer than the hurricane screaming inside my chest. My father Adrian turned to face me with that same expression he wore when I was 12, and caught him lying about where Mom's jewelry went after the divorce, that smooth practiced look that said I was the problem for noticing instead of him being the problem for doing it. "You're being dramatic, Lena," he said, and Harper wouldn't even look at me, just stared at the wall like if she stayed still enough she might disappear. "Harper is an adult and frankly you sound jealous." That word jealous hung in the air between us like poison, and I felt something crack inside my chest, something that had been holding me together since Mom left, since I learned to cook my own dinners at 14, since I realized my father saw people as things he could own or discard. I wanted to scream, but instead I heard myself say, "She needs to leave this house right now," and my father laughed, actually laughed. "You don't control my life," he snapped, stepping toward me with his jaw set in that way that meant he was done pretending to care about my feelings. "If you can't accept this, you can leave." I should mention that I've never been good at backing down from fights even when I should, never learned when to keep my mouth shut or let things go, and my pride has gotten me fired from 2 jobs and ended 3 relationships because I can't stand being wrong or looking weak. My mother used to say I was too intense, that I saw betrayal everywhere even when it wasn't there, that my suspicious nature would leave me alone someday. Maybe she was right, because an hour after I told my father he was disgusting and Harper was a manipulative snake, my suitcase was on the porch and the locks were changed. The first night in my car behind the grocery store on Fletcher Avenue, I told myself it was temporary, that I'd find a friend's couch or scrape together first and last month's rent somewhere, but my pride wouldn't let me ask for help, and my savings account had exactly $417 in it. I was 22 years old, sleeping in a Honda Civic that smelled like old French fries and the vanilla air freshener I'd bought to cover up the smell of my own unwashed hair. The gym membership I couldn't really afford became my shower, my sink, my only connection to feeling human, and I'd watch other women my age blow-dry their hair and chat about their weekends, while I scrubbed myself raw trying to wash off the shame. Meanwhile, Harper's social media, filled with photos of her smiling outside the admissions office at Redwood State University, captions thanking her amazing support system, hashtags about new beginnings and dreams coming true. My father was paying her tuition. I found out later, $53,000 a year plus housing plus a monthly allowance that was more than I'd made working full-time at the coffee shop before he kicked me out. I scrolled through those photos until my hands shook, memorizing every detail of her carefully crafted gratitude posts, her charity thrift store outfits that probably cost more than my car payment used to, her comments full of friends saying she deserved everything good in the world. My temper would flare and I'd want to comment to expose her, to scream the truth into her perfect digital life, but something stopped me every time. Not wisdom, not kindness, but a growing certainty that revenge rushed was revenge wasted. 3 months into living in my car, I saw the engagement announcement, and I actually laughed out loud in the parking lot, a sound that scared the teenager collecting shopping carts nearby. Adrian Vale and Harper Collins were thrilled to announce their engagement. The post said, with a photo of them on the back deck of my childhood home, the same deck where Harper and I used to paint our nails and talk about the boys we liked in high school. The ring on her finger caught the sunset perfectly, probably a professional photographer, probably cost more than I'd see in 5 years. The comments were full of congratulations, nobody questioning the fact that she was young enough to be his daughter, that she'd been my best friend, that something about this whole situation stank like 3-day-old garbage in August heat. I sat there in my car with my phone in my hand, and felt that familiar rage building, that impulsive need to do something right now, to ruin it immediately, but a tiny voice in my head whispered, "Wait, plan, make it count." For once in my life I listened to that voice instead of my anger. I started going to the library during the day when it was too hot to sit in the car, telling myself I was job hunting, but really I was digging. My father was a financial consultant for Meridian Group, one of those firms that managed portfolios for rich people who wanted to get richer, and I still had the passwords to some of his old email accounts because he never changed them, and I'd helped him set up his computer a few years back. I know that makes me sound terrible, invasive, exactly like the jealous daughter he'd called me, but I was past caring about being the bigger person. I found the first transfer to Harper's account dated March 15th 2 years ago, $4,500 with the memo line reading educational support. Then another in April, another in June, a pattern emerging like bones through soil. I cross-referenced the dates with my own memories, with old text messages I'd never deleted, with photos on social media, building a timeline that made my stomach turn. Harper had been 17 when the money started, still in high school, still sleeping in my guest room on weekends and eating breakfast at our kitchen table. The emails were worse, my father's corporate account messaging her personal Gmail, subject lines like thinking of you and can't wait to see you again, and we need to be more careful. My hands shook as I screenshot everything, as I created a folder on a library computer and uploaded it to a cloud drive, as I built a case against them both with the methodical focus I should have used to build a life instead of a bomb. But the deeper I dug, the more obsessed I became, sleeping even less than before, skipping meals to save money, but really because my appetite had disappeared into this black hole of research and rage. Tara from the gym asked me if I was okay one morning when I'd been standing under the shower for 40 minutes, and I snapped at her that I was fine, mind your own business, and watched her face close off with hurt. That's my problem, always has been. I push away anyone who tries to help, because accepting help means admitting I need it, and admitting I need it means I'm weak. So I stayed alone with my screenshots and my timeline and my growing certainty that I wasn't just exposing an affair, I was exposing something darker, something that had been happening under my nose while I trusted both of them completely. The invitation to the engagement party came through Facebook, one of those public event pages that Harper created with photos of her and my father looking happy and in love, with a date 3 weeks away, and a location that made me want to put my fist through the library computer screen. My childhood home, the house I'd been thrown out of, the place where I learned to ride a bike and had my first kiss, and apparently where my best friend had been groomed by my own father. The event description talked about celebrating new beginnings and love finding a way, and I read it until the words blurred together, until my anger crystallized into something cold and sharp and patient. I had 3 weeks to perfect my presentation, to organize my evidence, to plan exactly how I'd walk into that party and detonate the truth in front of everyone who mattered to them both. I spent those weeks building something more than a folder of documents. I built a narrative, a story that would make sense to people who wanted to believe my father was a good man and Harper was just a young woman in love. I printed bank statements and highlighted the relevant transfers. I created a timeline poster with photos and dates that showed the progression from family friend to something else entirely. I even found the guest list for the party through Harper's public event page and researched who would be there, which of my father's colleagues needed to see this, which of Harper's college friends deserved to know who they were celebrating. My obsession had turned me into something I didn't recognize, someone who cross-referenced social media posts with financial records at 2 a.m, someone who practiced her confrontation speech in the grocery store parking lot until the words felt like weapons. Tara tried to talk to me one more time at the gym, caught me muttering to myself in front of my locker, and I saw the concern in her eyes, but I brushed past her because I couldn't afford distractions, couldn't let anyone talk me down from what I was about to do. The night before the party I barely slept, just sat in my car organizing my folder for the 100th time, making sure every piece of evidence was in order, that my timeline made sense, that I had answers ready for every question they might throw at me. Part of me knew I was going too far, that the rational thing would be to take this to the police or a lawyer or literally anyone with actual authority, but my pride wouldn't let me hide behind someone else's power. I needed to face them myself, needed to watch their faces when the truth came out, needed everyone in that room to know that Lena Vale wasn't dramatic or jealous or wrong. I was right, and I had proof, and they were going to pay for what they'd done to me. I wore the same dress I'd worn to my high school graduation, the only nice thing I still owned that wasn't wrinkled from living in a suitcase, and I showed up exactly 1 hour after the party started when I knew the house would be full, and everyone would be drinking, and their guards would be down. The folder felt heavy in my hands as I walked up the driveway, past the expensive cars that lined the street, past the catered waiters carrying champagne on silver trays, toward the front door that used to be mine. My heart hammered against my ribs and my palms were sweating, but I made myself keep walking, made myself turn the handle, made myself step inside. The living room went quiet in stages, conversations dying like dominoes as people noticed me standing there. I saw my father first, frozen halfway up the staircase with a drink in his hand, his face going from confused to angry in the space of a heartbeat. Harper clutched his arm, her engagement ring catching the light, her skin going pale under her carefully applied makeup. The room smelled like expensive perfume and catered food, and the kind of wealth I'd grown up around but never really belonged to. "Hello, Dad," I said, and my voice came out steadier than I expected, cold and clear and sharp. "You're not welcome here," he said, but his voice shook just slightly, and I knew he was afraid of what I might do, what I might say in front of all these people who thought he was respectable. I ignored him and turned to face the crowd, maybe 40 people scattered through the living room and dining room, colleagues from his firm and Harper's college friends and neighbors who'd known me since I was a child. "Did he tell you how they met?" I asked, and the room was so quiet I could hear someone's champagne glass bubbling. "Freshman year of college." I opened the folder and pulled out the first photograph, Harper at 16 in our backyard at a barbecue I barely remembered, my father standing close beside her with his hand on her shoulder, both of them smiling at whoever was taking the picture. "No," I said, "it was earlier." I laid out the photos on the coffee table one by one, watching people lean in to look, watching the confusion spread across faces. Bank statements came next, printed on regular paper but official-looking enough, highlighting the transfers that started when Harper was still in high school. "Quiet transfers," I said. "Starting 2 years before Harper turned 18. Educational support," the memo lines said, but we all know what this really was. "You're twisting things," Harper said, and her voice was barely a whisper, her perfect composure cracking like ice over deep water. "This isn't what it looks like." "Then explain it," I said, meeting her eyes for the first time, watching her flinch away from whatever she saw in my face. "Explain why a 50-year-old man was sending money to his daughter's teenage friend. Explain the emails." I pulled out printed screenshots, dozens of them, messages between my father's work account and Harper's personal email. "Thinking of you," I read aloud. "Can't wait to see you again, we need to be more careful." I looked up at my father. Careful about what exactly? His face had gone from pale to red, anger flooding back now that the initial shock was wearing off. "You broke into my private accounts," he said. "You violated my privacy, you little." "I documented your crimes," I cut him off, my voice rising. "You groomed a teenager, you used your money to control her. You threw your own daughter out on the street to hide your disgusting relationship." People were pulling out their phones now, some recording, some probably texting other people about the drama unfolding. A woman I recognized as my father's boss stood near the fireplace with her arms crossed, watching everything with an expression I couldn't read. Harper was crying now, mascara running down her cheeks, but she wasn't looking at me or at my father, she was staring at the floor like she wanted it to swallow her whole. "You don't understand," she said. "You don't know anything about what happened." "Then tell me," I said, and I was surprised by how much I meant it, how part of me still wanted her to have some explanation that would make this okay. "Tell everyone here the truth." But she just shook her head and buried her face in her hands, and my father moved toward me with his jaw clenched and his fists tight at his sides. "You've destroyed my life," he said, and his voice was hoarse with rage or grief or something I couldn't identify. "You've destroyed everything." "No," I said, and I felt something break inside me, something that had been holding back tears for months. "You did that yourself, you chose this. You chose her over your own daughter, you threw me away like I was nothing, you paid for her college while I slept in my car." My voice cracked on the last word and I hated myself for it, hated showing weakness in front of all these people, but I couldn't stop. "I was homeless because of you, I showered at a gym, I ate 1 meal a day. And you were here playing house with my best friend." "That's enough," someone said, and I turned to see 2 men in security uniforms moving toward me. My father must have hired them for the party, probably worried something like this might happen. "I'm leaving," I said, clutching my folder to my chest. "But everyone in this room knows the truth now. Everyone knows what you are." The security guards escorted me out gently, more professionally than I deserved probably, and I heard the party dissolve into chaos behind me, raised voices and accusations, and the sound of Harper sobbing. I made it to my car before I started shaking, adrenaline and relief, and something like grief pouring through me all at once. I'd done it, I'd exposed them, I'd made them pay for what they'd done to me. So why did I feel so empty? The fallout happened faster than I expected, news spreading through social media and my father's professional network, like wildfire through dry grass. 2 days after the party, his firm announced he was taking a leave of absence pending an internal investigation into financial misconduct and inappropriate relationships. Harper deleted all her social media accounts, every photo and post and carefully crafted piece of her public image, just gone like she'd never existed. I got a call from a lawyer named Elliot Kane who worked for my father's firm, offering me a settlement in exchange for my silence, $25,000, and a signed agreement that I wouldn't speak to the press or pursue legal action. I should have said no on principle, but I was tired and broke and living in my car, so I took the money and signed the papers and tried not to think about what that made me. The engagement fell apart within 2 weeks, Harper moving back in with her mother according to a mutual friend who didn't know we weren't speaking anymore, my father putting the house up for sale and relocating to another state for a fresh start that he definitely didn't deserve. I rented a small studio apartment in a building that smelled like cigarettes and had questionable stains on the carpet, but it had a bed and a shower and a lock on the door, and that was more than I'd had in months. I should have felt victorious, satisfied, like I'd won some kind of justice, but instead I felt hollow and mean and smaller than before. 3 months after the party, I was going through my cloud drive, deleting old files to make space, when I found an email I'd missed before. It was buried in a thread from 4 years ago, Harper's personal Gmail to my father's work account, and the subject line just said please. I almost deleted it without reading, but something made me click, made me scroll through the conversation, made me read words that turned everything I thought I knew inside out. You said if I didn't keep seeing you, you'd stop helping my mom, Harper had written, and the timestamp showed she was barely 17. I don't want to do this anymore, but she needs the medical bills paid, and I don't know what else to do. Please just let me stop. I read it 3 times, then 4, then sat staring at my laptop screen until my eyes burned and the words blurred together. My father's response was deleted, probably scrubbed from the server during the investigation, but Harper's next message filled in the gaps. Okay, I understand. I'll come over this weekend. Please don't be angry. The next email in the thread was dated 6 months later, Harper asking if the money could go directly to the hospital, instead of through her because her mother was asking questions. Then another 6 months after that, Harper saying she'd broken up with her high school boyfriend like my father asked, that she was sorry for making him jealous, that she'd be better. I pulled up Harper's mother's Facebook page, something I'd never thought to check before, and found post after post about medical bills and fundraisers, and gratitude for mysterious anonymous donors who'd helped with her treatment for chronic kidney disease. The timeline matched perfectly with my father's transfers to Harper, with the escalation of their relationship, with everything I'd assumed was Harper being manipulative and predatory when maybe, possibly, probably she'd been trapped. My stomach turned and I barely made it to the bathroom before throwing up, the weight of what I'd done crashing over me like a wave. I'd destroyed Harper's reputation, exposed her most vulnerable moments to strangers and social media, called her a manipulator and a snake when she might have been a victim. I'd been so sure of my narrative, so certain in my righteousness, that I'd never stopped to question whether I had the whole story. My impulsiveness, my pride, my inability to see past my own hurt had turned me into exactly the kind of person I'd accused my father of being, someone who used power to hurt people who couldn't fight back. I tried to find Harper after that, sent messages to her deleted social media accounts and her mother's Facebook, and even drove to the address I had for them, but they were gone, moved away to somewhere I couldn't follow. My father never responded to my attempts to contact him either, probably on advice from his lawyers, probably happy to let me drown in my guilt and uncertainty. The settlement money sat in my bank account like blood money. Funding an apartment I didn't deserve, and a life built on revenge that might have been aimed at the wrong person. I still don't know the whole truth, probably never will. Maybe Harper was a victim who learned to play the game. Maybe my father was worse than I imagined. Maybe the reality is more complicated than any story I could tell about heroes and villains. What I do know is that I let my worst qualities, my pride and my anger and my stubborn refusal to admit I might be wrong, turn me into someone capable of cruelty I can't take back. I exposed them both and destroyed what was left of my family and my conscience, and the twist I never saw coming was that the person I hurt most might have been the one who deserved my protection instead of my revenge. And that's the end of today's story. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss the next one. Feel free to share your thoughts in the comments, I'd love to hear them. Thanks for watching and I'll see you in the next story.